This is the Book Deal podcast,
where you will discover the inspiring stories behind your favourite books.
We interview seasoned and debut authors, as well as publishing industry professionals, to bring you the best tips and advice on how to get that elusive book deal.
So no matter what stage of writing you're at, we've got you covered. I'm Tina Strawn.
I'm Madeline Cleary.
And I'm Natasha Rye.
And join us as we pull back the curtain of published authors,
one deal at a time. The Book Deal podcast acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters which it's recorded on, and pays respect to their elders past, present, and emerging.
Welcome to the Book Deal podcast's first spoiler book club, where we dive between the covers of your favourite novels. In this episode, I chat with best-selling and highly acclaimed author Kate Mildenhall and a few other readers and writers about Kate's latest novel, The Hiding Place. And as the name of this book club suggests, switch off now unless you're happy with all the spoilers. Also, a language warning for this episode in case you've got little ones in the car. Enjoy!
Kate Mildenhall, welcome back to the Book Deal podcast.
Thank you so much, Madeline.
Now, a warning for our listeners. If you've missed all our spoiler tags and warnings, this is your last chance to get out now. If you have not read Kate's novel, The Hiding Place, or you don't want to be spoiled, then this is your time to leave. So don't blame us. You've been warned.
Yeah, you have been warned.
So we've got a lot to cover tonight, Kate, namely Death by Star Picket Fence, Death Cap Mushroom Gravy, Mine Shafts, Highly Questionable Decision Making, and Phil's Bloody Lamb.
That is such a great way to introduce it, and a way that no one has before, because they are all spoilers. I love this, Madeline.
Spoilers. This is Spoiler Book Club. All right, so I want to start first about using your friends as book inspo.
Mm-hmm.
So you've said quite publicly before that the Willow Creek camping crew is not your own camping crew friends.
Yes.
So I'm just double checking that you and your friends definitely have not covered up any dead bodies.
We have not, or if we have, I am not privy to this information. So we have not. We have, I have to say, on various occasions, we have hypothetically discussed as a group, mostly as my girlfriends, if we're away on a girls' weekend, that if for some reason we killed someone or came across a body, how would we deal with it? So we have had that kind of discussion about who would bring what qualities to the table.
What would you bring to the table?
Loyalty, generally, just having everyone's back. I'm not a scientist. There's one in our group who is the scientist who we decided could deal with the forensics. And there was one person who self-declared that they would go to the cops as well. So, we are a varied bunch.
I actually know that because at your book launch at Read, you're looking horrified. I was sitting right next to your camping crew.
Yeah.
They were against the wall, all of them.
They were, literally.
They were literally against the wall. Every time you said something about the book, characters, plot, arcs, they would all give each other shifty eyes. So I'm just not too sure.
What has been discussed is, and I think that this is really interesting because there's that idea of, and this is for all writers, of what we don't recognize, what might be our blind spots. And so what I do know has happened is that there are various offshoot conversations between my friends where they are saying, oh, that's me. Do you remember when I did that? Or that's you, or that's someone else. And then a little sister of the gang, of the kind of extended gang, who sometimes does camp with us, sent her sister a message saying, is everyone really angry with Kate? So there is clearly enough in there that people feel it's familiar territory. But I think the other thing that's been delightful during the tour, or what's made me feel a little bit more comfortable, is how many random people who are in no way related to me are identifying strongly with the group dynamics, which is what I was going for. So, hopefully that's the way. But it was one of the most stressful parts of writing the book, of making sure that that idea that I've talked about, I think I talked about it when we recorded previously, Madeline, that the idea was that I wanted to take the piss out of myself first and not out of friendship itself. So that the idea of kind of us all being in on the joke and not feeling like someone or someone's particular character trait was the butt of a joke. So it felt like a difficult line to tread. Maybe I'll go back to historical fiction like you.
You're always welcome, Kate. I mean, you always dabble in across genres, so I'm sure you'll be back. So in talking about that kind of difficulty and the challenges, which character did you find the most difficult and challenging to write?
I guess the characters, Phil and Lou, and Ness to a degree, were the easiest to write because they had kind of so much to do, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I found getting into Josie's kind of science brain, which is something that I really wanted to do. So Josie's the one, who's planting the acacia. That was a bit trickier for me because I wanted to reflect her scientific thinking. It's something that I did with Mim in The Mother Fault. I wanted to kind of reflect the experience and the profession. So she was hard for that reason. And Stella was a joy to write. I loved writing Stella, the teenager. But I was also very conscious of getting that right. So there's one scene in there, the scene where she's talking about what's happened with the hockey girls and getting called into the welfare person's office at school. That one I checked really carefully with my eldest daughter, and she went over it with me and checked that it was that I had that I'd got that right. The other thing too, in terms of feedback that I got, which was really interesting and really important, Tegan Bennett Daylight, amazing writer and mentor and manuscript assessor, she did a really early read, which is before the one that Mark Mufotza Russell did for me, which was amazing. And her feedback was about Wendy and Sal in the general store. And it didn't have to change much, but she said, just be really careful that you don't caricature these characters, because these characters are the ones that you have to get absolutely right, because she quite rightly picked up what my intent was, which was to make fun of the city slickers, but not to make fun of the people who lived in that place. So that was another
I think you did that really well. Let's talk about Phil though, because I think Phil's just his chapters are just a joy to read. Like they're so fun and so funny. Did you enjoy writing from his perspective?
I so enjoyed him. And actually, I've just been going back through my journal today. So I keep a journal of each book that I write since my second book. And they end up, like, I'm looking at this one. This is 106,000 words, the one for The Hiding Place. And it's got all of my notes and my questions to myself and my research and when things go wrong, etc. And I found the section where I was at my kids' basketball training and sitting upstairs, and where I start writing Phil, because he's a basketball coach. And I knew that I had this guy there, that there was a couple. And, but I literally have started it's this kind of guy. He's a chewer. He's got a really square head. He's almost military in his movement. He was attractive at one time, but he doesn't realize that spark's gone. He's an old footy player who still has tickets on himself. Like, these are all the notes that I've got in my journal. And that's, so after that, that's where Phil came from. And really early on too, I knew that food, when you're camping, for any campers here, other than my mum and dad, because I know they are, and on holidays, I guess, group holidays. And at this time of year, food is such a central joy and concern of families and big groups, and I think for us, when we're camping, it always feels like you are kind of always preparing for the next meal or cleaning up after it or thinking about the next one. So I knew that was going to feature as a key dynamic or tension, on each of these 3 days. And I knew that I wanted a lamb. And I knew that Phil was the guy to do it. That exact kind of, and I watched, like Phil watches the YouTubes to see other guys doing their lamb spit. I watched a lot of YouTube and TikTok lamb spit men getting ready with their little brushes and all their little things. And so I really knew I wanted that. And I really knew that I wanted that to become a key moment where they, you know, where he has to where he stuffs up killing the lamb.
I think it's interesting because I felt like I related to a lot of the characters, and that actually scared me a little bit. But I could also see Phil in so many blokes that I know as well.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I think one of the things is that tension, and I've had so many guys who've read it and said, oh, am I a little bit like Phil? I hope I'm not, but maybe I am. But also people who come to have, as I did, some empathy for him. He's very, I guess he's in a way honest with himself about what he's trying to do. He's the shit stirrer, you know, and people will have that friend who likes to poke the bear and wants to be the one who makes arguments, or who wants to say, oh, you know, to be honest, but to speak frankly, and those kinds of things. It's definitely not me, because I'm more of a peacekeeper, or I like to think I am. So I guess in a sense I admire that quality of him. But he was also very easy to make fun of.
Oh, for sure. And he is a bit of a, you know, poke the bear, stir up things, but he's also a people pleaser in the end too, I think.
Yeah. I also did really, when I remember now, I haven't found this point in the journal yet, but I remember when I decided that he was going to be the one who was off the booze, that I was like, yes, that's exactly who Phil is, because he's also going to be, you know, very smug about it, a bit of a martyr about it. And then again, these are these things that sometimes, and the writers who are here might know this, there's things that you put in, and I call them portals, because when you come back, you realize that they were like a gift you gave yourself early on, and you didn't know what they were there for or what they were meant to be. And so the fact that I'd made him the one who wasn't drinking when everyone else is drinking so much, and then realizing that allowed for a point where he does start drinking again over the weekend, was such a joy, because I was like, oh yes, I've gifted myself this part of the plot, or this little kind of moment.
Clever. I think that's a really good tip. All right, I want to talk about Death by Star Picket Fence. I had to write that term down. I didn't know what it was, so I googled it.
What did you find?
Oh, I saw it. Yeah, it had the poking up, and I was just imagining Jacob, you know, sort of prone, his feet scurrying in the dirt and everything. Okay, Jacob, what was the process of working out your, not murder victim, but victim?
Yeah, well, that was a massive process first. So many people died at various times. In one draft, multiple people died.
Who died?
Like the hunter. Aiden died, but he wasn't Aiden at that stage, but he died as well. And at one stage, here's all the spoilers. At one stage, it was Avril who killed him at the end to protect her daughters. At one point, it's hard to say this, because then what if all of you say, oh no, that would have been better. At one point, the kids, for a really long time, the kids lured Jacob into a mine shaft.
Really?
And then they left him in there.
Who was the mastermind? Stella?
Stella was the mastermind, but all the kids, a little bit Lord of the Flies. They were angrier at him. He'd been more cruel to them directly. But what I realized, and the reason that I moved away from that, it was this thing of circling the idea that I knew that the kids were central, and that the kids, kind of as a block led by Stella, were really central to the plot. And there was a point when I realized I can't make the kids do it. And it was sometimes, I don't know if others writers do this, but sometimes I would do these exercises where I'd like pitch ahead, even though I knew that I would not put this in the book. So I'd pitch ahead like 10 years or 20 years, and trying to write the kids knowing that they had lured someone into a hole and killed them when they were kids was too much for me. So I decided the kids couldn't do it. And then a little bit inspired by the high country murder that was happening, I decided that they would burn the body. But again, this is where your research really works well, because I realized that they couldn't get the fire hot enough. And Dad, maybe I think you helped with this, CFA man, and Mum. I realized that they couldn't get the fire hot enough over that period of time to get rid of the body. At one point, and Mark may even have read this version, at one point they moved the body multiple times to different places over the weekend. And I really liked that one as well, but it became even more of a farce. And I couldn't fit everything in. At one point, death was by crossbow, but really hard to accidentally kill someone with a crossbow.
I can imagine.
You have to kind of pull it right back. So then I decided on picket fence and tractor. So the star picket was most joyously acted out for me by my husband and the guy he landscapes for.
No.
I didn't even ask for this, but one day they sent me a picture from site where they were testing out how far the star picket would go in, how far the t-shirt would go up. I remember talking to people at length about how much blood there would be, the kind of maths of how the tractor would have to move for these things to happen. Because the thing that was most difficult for me, aside from killing someone, which was a little bit difficult, and working out who to kill, was trying to make sure that the reader would come along with me, that they would buy it, that they would be like, yes, I see how everyone is angry right now. I see how this moment has come into being. I see how Ness is kind of clambering on the tractor. I see what happens. I see it and I buy it. So I needed them to buy that part. And then I needed them to buy what happens next and the terrible decisions that everyone makes. But also the joy of knowing that this book was about property and boundaries and fence lines specifically, and that it was the fence itself that would kill Jacob, was another one of those moments where I was like, of course the fence is what kills him.
Of course, that makes total sense. And yes, I could very visually picture this. I think I said to you, I first read this book when I was on the beach, and I got to that scene, and my husband was next to me, and I was making these like gruesome kind of like ooh noises. So you did it well, Kate. Death cap mushrooms, though, that was another possible death. I actually thought Josie was going to let it go. When she was doing that, I don't know if others, I was just going, no, Josie, what are you thinking? Yeah. What are you doing?
I'm so glad. It's the most joy when you get messages, and sometimes you get messages from people like while they are reading, and getting those ones where they're like, oh my God, what is she doing? What is she doing? They were some of the best.
Tell us about the mushrooms. And I know that everyone's probably really interested in mushrooms, particularly living in Melbourne at the moment too.
Yeah. So the mushrooms came in originally because I think the way it happened is that I wanted an oak tree. And then I realized that death caps often grew under them in this place. At this time, I was like, okay, there's going to be death caps. There's going to be all of these threats. I just wanted to keep the river is a threat. The mine shafts are a threat. The mushrooms are a threat. The people, obviously, are the biggest threat. Again, it was one of those things. I knew that Josie's loyalty to Lou, I wanted that to keep amping up during the book to an extent where she would also do anything. You know, we've got this kind of dynamic where they will all do anything for each other to a certain degree. And then, of course, again, it was one of those things. She had the mushrooms. She had them. She hadn't put them in the fire. And for a while, I thought that just the threat of it alone would be enough. And then when I realized that I was kind of, I guess, amping up the funny and the satire and a bit of the theatrics, I already had the idea of the show to finish it. I always knew that that's the way it was going to finish. I wasn't quite sure how, but I knew that was how it was going to finish. Yeah, it was like, oh, this is she's going to try and do it. She's going to try and get rid of Aiden and Dave and Libby as well, because maybe that they have to go too. I didn't ever think that it would happen. Like I never intended for them to die as well. So yeah, I always knew she was going to pull back from the edge, but it was fun to make her go there.
Oh yeah. Nerve-wracking for all of us. It's interesting because slowly so what happened to Jacob is revealed. So all the campers are starting to all find out slowly, incrementally. And not one of them really ever wavers about trying to help cover it up. All of them just go, okay, no worries. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do it? Is this an old friends thing, do you think?
I think also the fact that it happened slowly. So I think had there been 15 people in a round table right at the start, somebody, would have convinced everyone else, no, we can't do this. But that idea of the incremental stuff ups and the small decisions that people make, and then you're like, okay, well, I guess if everyone's already made the decision, then I'll just go along with that. That's really what I wanted to play on, because as each new person finds out, it's kind of like, well, we've lost that opportunity. Now someone's going to be implicated. Everything after the first moment means that, either Ness or Lou are going to be implicated. So that was kind of fun to play with, but I did have to have a spreadsheet, particularly when I gave it to the editor, of who knew at what time which secret. I think it's called the secret spreadsheet, and it's like, well, who knows about the affair, who knows about the body, all of these things, to try and make sure that I had that right, because it was important to me that one of the adults, and it kind of had to be Marnie, that she never knows until the end. That was important as well.
So in terms of you said you had this idea of what the end would be, and you also have like multiple perspectives as well, and so you've got this secret spreadsheet. How else did you map all the multiple perspectives? Did you plot out this novel? Because often thrillers are plotted.
Yes, I don't. I've actually got something I can show you.
Oh, we're going to get show and tell. This is exciting.
So I didn't have. So this is the way that I, like, people might have seen these before. This is the way that I do, like, just the contents chapter outline. But this, I think, was the first one where I color coded the characters, because I didn't really plan it. I didn't plan it to go in order necessarily. So I'm holding up a kind of an outline document with chapter headings. It's 3 pieces of A4 paper stuck together, and it's color coordinated with 6 different colors, and they're all the different character names. And this was a really good one, I remember, because it was when I realized that I had them about right. I've kind of got 14, 12, 13 sections each. So I was like, instinctively, I've given them a kind of the right amount of space on the page. I had to move a few things around. I did a lot of, like, at various times, and Mark was incredibly helpful. And you probably remember this differently even than I did do, Mark. Mark was incredibly helpful, and Hayley Scrivener was incredibly helpful, and Anna Downs, 3 writers who I sought advice from at different points in the shape of what a crime thriller needed to reveal at what time. So what Mark was really, really good at was explaining that for a long time, the death kind of happened more in the middle of the book. And he quite rightly said, a reader is going to anticipate it either being up front or at the end. They're kind of the 2 places that you could do it. And of course, as he quite rightly said, you can do whatever you want. But these are the kinds of shapes that a reader will expect. And I remember Anna doing a similar thing with me at one point, where I couldn't identify what was wrong with the pace of it. I had all the characters, I had the space, I had all these things going on, but there was something that wasn't kind of working about it. So working out where those kind of climactic scenes were and how each day was going to finish and where the stakes were at each point was really important.
Because a lot of times as well, some of the thrillers are like the whodunits as well, but this is very much, up front who's done it, and it's just that slow reveal, which is really cool.
Yeah. and how is it going to resolve? And I think at one point my editor said it goes too fast. Like the pace is too fast. And so trying to get it to work up towards the ending so that, with only maybe 10, 15 pages to go, I don't know, you can tell me, readers, if this is how you felt, you're still not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I wanted you to feel is conflicted about what you wanted to happen. Did you want them to get away with it? I can see you laughing, Jack. Like, do you want them to be able to pack up and roll on out of there and everything to be okay? Or did you want them to get found out? And I think that's a really interesting question. That's the kind of question I like being asked as a reader, I guess.
And maybe because we know that Jacob is not a good person, we kind of assume that at the end. It does help the things. You go, oh, I kind of wish they got away with it at the end. I don't know. Maybe we're going to open up for questions very soon. So if you have some comments about this, we'd be very, very keen to hear your views and your thoughts. Let's talk about the end, because you said that you always had that scene of the play at the end. And then obviously at the end, Stella uploads the video she's edited with all the hijinks from that weekend. And like you said, I think when Stella uploaded that video, I was both cheering her on, but also going, why would you do that? Like, just, oh. So I think it's a mixture of both. So why do you think she did it?
Right. So it's a mixture of both. And I think there are a couple of things. The idea of cameras and surveillance, like in one part, that's been something I've been interested in my other works as well. But when I went to visit this property at Cooper's Creek, the original property that it's based on, and we were coming like down the mountain, exactly as it's described in the book, there were all these cameras in the trees. And I was like, that is so weird. But also, oh yeah, well, maybe people are doing dodgy things out here, or whatever they've got them for. So I always had this idea of cameras and surveillance, and then the deer hunter, and I knew about trail cameras and all of those things. So that kind of that wasn't an idea at the start. It was just bubbling along underneath. I think Stella acts in a way that I can certainly recognize in 15-year-old, 16-year-old me, which is deeply principled, thinks she's absolutely right and justified, and has no concept of thinking past the moment and what is the potential fallout of what she's about to do. So with that kind of, huge rush of fury or indignance or self-righteousness that one can get, I imagine at any age, but particularly in those teen years, that she just goes with it. I will make you all pay, and I will show you what incredible hypocrites you are. When I say I always had the ending, I knew that they were going to put on a concert, because that was a big part of my growing up, and a big part of, the camping thing of the kids doing their show and all the adults sitting around and not wanting to watch anymore, but they have to. But it was when I was at Varuna at the end of 2024, and I had this most magnificent crew there, including Christine and their husband, Anthony Mullins, who's a screenwriter, and also Laura Elvery. And it was there that we were talking about Hamlet and Shakespeare, and the idea of a play within a play, all of these kinds of ideas, and of how a play within a play might reveal the murderer, etc. And I said, I couldn't possibly do it like that, though. I couldn't do the play within a play. And I can remember Laura saying, why not? So I had, originally it was just the uploading of the kind of, look at what we made to celebrate that we were away this weekend. But then I turned it into this idea of the play.
And I love it because at the start, everyone's laughing and thinking, what great parents we are. Like, look at these children, look what they're performing. It's so great. And then as it just, it's masterful what Stella did. It is, regardless of whether she should have done it or not.
Yeah. And the joy in writing that too, and that took a lot of editing to get right. Originally, I wrote the whole thing as it was kind of coming out of my brain. I wrote it all from Stella's perspective. But once I understood what the novel was going to look like, I knew that it had to rotate through the perspectives, but also what a gift that was, because each character understands what's happening at a different point in time as well. It's a cascade, exactly like the cascade of disaster has happened to them. But then there's kind of like this, I don't know what you would call it, like almost, I think of it as three endings. So there's the end of the play, and then there's the killing of the deer, and then there's the general store.
Yeah.
So it was like these three endings, and that's a risky move to pull off. And my publisher didn't necessarily want that, but I knew that again, with this idea that I never wanted to satirize friendship itself. And I wanted to see, and I hope that this is what comes across, that in the end, in that little tableau section where they all kind of, when they realize that Aiden's going to kill the deer, they all leap in front of each other.
Yeah.
That was really important. And I fought really hard for that, because that was the bit where I was like, they've done these terrible things, but in the end, this is how they will go down together, kind of idea. So it was like having these little kind of resolutions within the thing, because that I also wanted Wendy and Sal to be going like, well, we could have told you that something like this would happen when these blow-ins come into town, so like just to have those three little bits.
It's perfect. It was a perfect ending to a wonderful book. We are going to now open up to you if you've got any questions you would like to ask Kate. And while you are warming up your brains, and feel free to come off mute or pop it in the chat if you prefer, I'm going to ask Kate one of our pre-submitted questions. So we've got a few actually. So we might have actually answered this, but when you set out to write the book, did you know how it would end? So I think you've answered that bit. And how many people, did you do a count? How many people died before you landed on a final draft, Kate?
Yeah, lots in different situations. The other thing, so Aiden died at one point because he was also shot. There was also these bikies in it for a long time and a shipping container.
Okay, let's talk about that.
So that was my original thing. There was this whisper when I went to visit the property, the original property, Cooper's Creek. There was this whisper of bikies being involved. And, you never want to research too deeply with bikies, just in cases. But I did a little bit of talking around the place and realized that, sometimes these big rural properties, that's where bikies put their stuff, in shipping containers. And maybe they grow their weed or various other things that they have. And so for a long time, it was bikies who were on the fence line, or, there was a shipping container that hadn't been moved when the property sold. And the key scene, and one of the first scenes that I wrote, was that Josie goes to plant the acacia and she finds the shipping container and she's trying to look inside and she drops her phone inside and can't get it out. And, so there's sometimes scenes where you write them and you're like, that's ace. I feel stressed. My characters are stressed. This is a high stakes situation, even though it's kind of not, but it really is. Like, I am deeply stressed about this phone being in the shipping container. And then as you move things along, it doesn't work anymore. And it can be really hard to get rid of. This is the classic kill your darlings. It can be really hard to get rid of scenes that feel like they were integral to the draft. But yeah, the bikies didn't make it. So some of them died. At one point, like I've just seen in my journal, I had, does one of the kids die? And very quickly I said, no, that's not what happens.
Do you know,
I couldn't possibly do that.
When I was doing my second read through, you do set it up that something will happen to a kid as well. And I think the reader is constantly
Eden
anxious.
goes missing.
When Eden goes missing.
Yeah,
exactly.
and when Eden goes missing, and that's kind of a catalyst for lots of things too, because that's where Stella really loses her shit too, because she's like, I shouldn't be the one has to look after the kids. So that was important, but I wanted that constant kind of threat to be there all the time. So lots and lots of people died. And I think maybe I've said this before, people might have heard me say that it was Hayley Scrivener who, when I said, how do you decide who to kill though, Hayley? Like, that's so stressful. And she said, you kill whoever, excuse my language, whoever the fuck you want. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And I don't have to ethically come to this point where I know that this is the right person to kill. You know, you can just kill whoever you want.
But at least
in
Jacob
fiction.
was a bad person, so it probably made him easier killing him.
Exactly.
Um,
It was.
do we have any questions?
Oh, there's Mark putting his hand up. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
You know how much I love this book. The thing I was really fascinated by, because you've got multiple perspectives, quite a few characters to juggle. They've all got very different ideas. They're all kind of complete. When they also tend to go on these kind of like internal monologues where they're talking about their viewpoint, and they're very funny and stuff like that. Were you starting with, okay, I've got all these, I'm going to have these archetypes, and suddenly here's the event, and then kind of let them build their character through that? Or were these rants kind of almost part of your character development when you were writing it in the beginning, if that makes sense?
Yeah. It's a really good question. So a lot of the rants, the internal stuff came out fully formed. But at different points was assigned to different characters. So yeah, the archetype of the characters didn't come first. The other thing that was really interesting about this is that I wrote a lot of the conversations or the fights, especially the ones that happen around the campfire, and there were lots more of them. I wrote those pretty early on, without attributes sometimes, so without dialogue tags. So I would be writing them and know the gist of the argument and the gist of the different viewpoints, but not necessarily who was saying them. And so then that was part of the editing, and a really hard part to get voices right, because I remember one of the bits of feedback at one point was sometimes in those bigger ensemble scenes, we lose whose point of view we're in because there's so much dialogue and you're not getting the point of view of the character. So that I had to work really carefully on that. But yeah, so actually, one of the things I would do is go, okay, well, I want them to talk about, Marnie's political campaign. What are all the possible opinions people are going to have on this? And then I would kind of stretch out from there. So yeah, at different points. And because originally there was like 17 adults, which was too many to have, even though that's how many I camp with. And I know that to be true of life. Like in many things, when you're writing a novel, like with dialogue, it can't actually realistically represent life. You're doing it in the novel form. I should say too, I haven't said this enough, and Mark, I didn't know necessarily Mark was going to be here. Mark, who is an extraordinary writer, who wrote The Wolf Who Cried Boy, which is one of my books of the year, was also such a very particular joy and insight giver in the drafting process for this. And differently to what I may have done before, is now I choose really carefully who I'm going to get to do reads for me, and it's for really specific purposes. So the fact that Mark and Hayley both agreed to do it, I was looking for people who understood the genre, particularly Mark's screenwriting background as well. So I just want to, just acknowledge that, Mark, how influential you were in helping this book get to its final place.
Oh, and I'm just going to echo that as well. I was completely stuck in my book 2 or book 3 planning, and I had a beer with Mark, and then suddenly it was all clear again. And Mark just asks very simple questions. So maybe, Mark, you need to set up some kind of service or something for writers who are...
Yes, a beer with Mark. That's what it is. And I think it is the asking of questions.
But it also relies on the fact that I loved your stuff, it has to be stuff that I enjoyed, because they're both beautiful books.
I can also echo that The Wolf Who Cried Boy is I think it is my top book for this year, I reckon. Oh, I shouldn't say that while we're talking about The Hiding Place.
So that's okay. No, we share around.
Share it. No, they're both amazing books. We haven't talked about Mushroom Lady, actually, Kate. I think one of the questions that we got was about the release of the mushroom tapes around the same time as this book. What's been the reader response to that? And that's a really interesting question.
Yeah. So I was super nervous once I knew I had the death caps, and when all that went. And at one point, I think I even said to my publisher, "Is this in bad taste? Should I take out the death caps? Like, this is quite a thing. And I think even it wasn't, it was already a big thing, but until the court case, it wasn't really apparent kind of how big it was. I decided that I was going to leave them in. But I did decline to write about it. Sometimes, Madeline, Mark, you'll know this too. Jack, you'll get to know this, that your publisher will ask you to write adjacent media articles about things for, The Guardian or The Monthly or whatever. And I did say I will not write about Erin Patterson Karambara in relation to this. And the other thing that at one point I had toyed with putting in the book was the idea of sovereign citizens. And that was another one where my publisher said, "Oh, do you want to write on, what's happened with Desi Freeman?" And I said, "No, absolutely, absolutely not. I don't," because I think that this, one of the important things to me was to raise these issues which I care about, climate emergency, property ownership, land rights, feral animals, all these things that are important to me, but to hold it lightly this time and to not be, I don't feel like in my previous books I've ever been didactic, but a little bit less earnest is how I've been talking about it, that to not kind of feel like I was shifting in any way towards preachy. And so thinking that I would have to kind of go from that satirical tone to seriously looking at something like the sovereign citizen movement and everything related to that was too much for me. So yeah, I guess it's a fine line. And there are other people, and if you think about things like Batuta Advocate or The Shovel, who do it so brilliantly, and they can take that kind of stuff and they can twist it and turn it. But they have far more skills than I do in that area.
No, I think that makes sense. And I mean, in the end, this book, it's a really fun ripper read as well. Like it touches on lots of different issues that we haven't covered in this chat tonight.
Love what we have covered though. It's like taking a deep breath when you can actually talk about all the bits in a book, because so often, you're kind of stressed. I know, Mark, you'll have had this experience too, because there's reveals in your books that you're like waiting to see if you're accidentally going to say something, or if the interviewer's accidentally going to say something, or you're kind of talking around in these weird circles to be able to say like, yes. So anyway, so I looked at exactly how he was going to fall on the star picket and where the blood was going to come out from. Like that's a joy, even though it makes me look a little bit crazy.
I would have loved to have seen your Google searches as well during the.
Well, the only thing that I really declined, because Madeline, that I quite like, getting my hands dirty kind of figuratively when I'm doing my research. So I got on the yacht for the Mother Fault, or I went and visited the abattoir for the Hummingbird Effect. The only thing that I decided was a step too far for me was to do the acacia DMT hallucinogenics this time. So that acacia, the hallucinogenic that comes from the acacia bark, specifically the raspberry wattle, if anyone needs to know this, that came to me from the woman who lives down the end of my street, who is a molecular genetic something to do with biology. And I said to her, I want someone in my book to grow a crop and I don't want it weed. What should they grow? And she said, have you heard about this stuff with acacia? And I was like, okay, I'll go down that rabbit hole. And at various times I did kind of have meetings set up with different people. And I was like, you know what? I don't need, in the middle of writing this book, to just have a massive kind of hallucinogenic trip and go off my head and not be able to get back to what's really important here.
It might have been a very different book.
It could have been exactly. Exactly.
Are you going camping this summer, Kate?
Yes. In only 2 weeks. And I no one has put in the chat that I'm not invited. I was going to get various t-shirts. People within the gang have made jokes about whether we should get, I'm not Phil t-shirts made or anything like that, but we're going to not do that. I think it will be really amusing because we camp at quite a big camping ground. I think it will be very amusing if anyone else is reading the book there. That will be funny.
That would be amazing. I feel like there's going to be so many jokes throughout your entire trip.
Yeah. I have brought it on myself.
Thank you so much, Kate. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for listening to the Book Deal podcast. We're able to bring you these weekly writerly chats because of our amazing patrons. Join the TPD family by becoming a member of our Patreon community at patreon.com/the Book Deal podcast. And if you love the pod, please give us a rating or review. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook.